see if this is the right height. Can you all hear me all right? Yes. I'm afraid this speech is not going to be off the cuff like a couple of my other ones. I'm going to have to read from my notes, but you'll soon see why. The issue of whether or not to allow badger cull was never about bovine TB, but rather it's always been about the right of landowners to kill anything they couldn't turn a profit from. This was always about eroding all the animal welfare laws this country has taken 30 years and more to build up, to disempower animal protection groups such as the RSPCA, and to give the public no say whatsoever as to what happens in the British countryside. Gavin Grant, who used to be the leader of the RSPCA, said at a conference in Taunton last year that the British countryside and its wildlife belongs to all of us, that it is our birthright, and that as human beings we have a spiritual need to live in a thriving and diverse ecosystem. And I can't tell you how much it made my heart sing to hear a man in a suit say that. David Cameron and his supporters would have us return to a feudal era where the British public were peasants and knew their place, where landowners would have more power and rights than anyone else, and their word would be law. He isn't concerned that his party has given life and death powers over a protected species to an undemocratic and unelected body, namely the NFU. He isn't bothered that local councils, particularly in the West Country and most recently here in Devon, contain many councillors who will represent the interests of the NFU and the Countryside Alliance over the wishes of the people who elected them. He isn't bothered that, quite apart from his electoral pledge to be the greenest government ever, his minority government has done more harm to the environment than any other in my lifetime. As if that wasn't enough, this relentless drive for an irrational, politically motivated, unscientific, immoral, criminally expensive, barbaric and inhumane slaughter of a protected species has done untold harm, not just to the image of Britain, but also to British farming. A bright spotlight has been shone on many farming practices, most especially the dairy industry, and what we've seen has not been pretty. It has affected all areas of British farming today, from the Soil Association's lack of leadership and misinformation on badgers, right through to the worst excesses of industrial dairy farming, wringing every last penny out of the lives and milk of cows to the expense of their life, health and welfare. The NFU and those farmers who have pushed for a badger cull have harmed not just the rural communities where their wish was granted in Somerset and Gloucestershire, but they have also harmed the wider farming community through their greed, bloodlust, superstition and disregard for both the laws of this land and the wishes of the British public. This whole drama to dominate both the countryside and Westminster has shown that it isn't the badgers who are out of control, but it is in fact the NFU who are out of control. Established during the Second World War during a national crisis to give the countryside a voice in Westminster, the NFU is now a financial institution consisting largely of bankers, representing less than 20% of British farmers, and they have gone from helping to solve a national crisis to actually creating a national crisis. The politicians who helped to create this crisis with them, both nationally and locally, are also still in power. Some of you will be voting in local elections in just over a year's time. If your local council has voted on a badger cull, find out if your local councillor voted to allow a badger cull on council-owned land, and name and shame them in your community if they did. Tell your neighbours and local friends, write to your local newspaper about it, attend hustings if there are any, and embarrass the hell out of them. Do the same with your local MPs in the national election next year as well. I'm happy to start the process here and now. The Devon County Council voted 3/5 in favour of a badger cull on council-owned land last month, and many of those voting in favour of killing a protected species had considerable vested interest. Here are just a few. I'm going to name and shame them. Councillor Berry, NFU and Countryside Alliance, as well as completely incapable of reading a badger cull report. Councillor Bowden, NFU and Countryside Alliance. Councillor Brooke, NFU, Countryside Alliance, Game Fair Conservancy Council, and the Country Landowners Association, who organise game fairs. That's 4 associations he belongs to. Councillor Chugg, NFU, Councillor Colthrop, Countryside Alliance, Councillor Dempster, Countryside Alliance, Councillor Dewhurst, Country Landowners Association, Councillor Hart, NFU, Councillor Julian, NFU, Councillor Sellis, Countryside Alliance, Councillor Yabsley, NFU, and the British Association of Shooting and So-Called Conservation. That's a total of 11 councillors who are also representing up to 5 different interest groups in favour of shooting and actively killing British wildlife.
Well said.
Whether they also represent their electorate is another matter. Who knows how many more councillors are also members of Hunts, as they didn't have to declare this. The 3 petitions opposing the badger cull that were handed in the month before were never even mentioned in that meeting. The 3rd petition alone totalled 6,426 signatures, and I'd like to remind you all, as if you probably don't know, is that it only took 3 weeks to get those signatures. That's how much we care about this. The vote was not recorded on film so that the electorate cannot see if their local councillor reflected their views. And there was no indication as to how this killing would be paid for at a time of massive government cuts. This doesn't sound like democracy to me. This badger cull was never about bovine TB, we all know that. It stretches further than who has the right to kill what in the British countryside. It stretches further even than how our food is produced and the welfare standards we expect. It stretches all the way to Parliament, to who has power, either elected or through the back door, as to how democracy works or doesn't in the UK today. As the electorate, we need to continue to push for electoral reform so that an attack on our wildlife, such as this on our badgers, cannot happen again. We need to demand that a minority government can never behave in this way again. We need to demand PR so that we have a true democracy next time and not an elected dictatorship, to steal one of your phrases. We need to insist on better environmental laws and protections from any and all parties in government. We need to demand the removal of the NFU from the corridors of power. We need to shout loudly in defence of independent animal welfare charities such as the RSPCA, and for better and permanent funding for the nation's wildlife crime units. We need to show our politicians of all political colours that the British public care passionately about the environment and that we will not allow our wildlife to be used as a political football in future. We need to recall why the Conservatives were known as the nasty party in the 1980s and assure them that we will not forget what they have done to our country and to our countryside in the 21st century. We need to demand of the next government a repeal of the gagging law, which gives a voice to the British public. Those farmers who wish to be known as the custodians of the countryside also need to shout loudly about ways of increasing and maintaining biodiversity in the British countryside, for your reputation has taken a battering thanks to the NFU. You will need to invest in farm stewardship schemes and work closely with the RSPCA, RSPB, the Badger Trust, the Barn Owl Trust and others to not only be seen to lead the way in responsible management of our countryside, but also to repair the trust in the farming community felt by many of the British public. And in turn, as consumers, we need to push for better subsidies for environmentally responsible farming, especially as they have recently been reduced. Terrific harm has been done to our countryside during this government, and it's up to the farming community to help to repair it. Those of you with badger sets in TB hotspot areas, get your badgers vaccinated against TB. Every county now has a team of willing volunteers to do this for free or very cheaply indeed. If you hear of farmers committing wildlife crimes, call the wildlife crime units, just as all responsible citizens across this country have been doing. Defend your patch of Eden from pollution, neglect, abuse and violence. Demonstrate by your actions that farming should not be the rape of the British countryside, but can be done responsibly with high animal welfare standards and with an eye to achieving and maintaining good biodiversity levels. Join other responsible farmers committed to help wildlife thrive in the UK and create a new voice for farming independent of the NFU. Contact the RSPB, who are planning to set up an alternative to the NFU, and show an interest in their stewardship scheme and help to repair the damage done by this government in your name. For those of you who don't own land, become a wildlife crime detective. Monitor badger sets in your area regularly. Photograph them when those sets are not interfered with so that you can prove if they do get attacked. Join your local badger group, and if you live in Devon, join the Devon Badger Defenders group so that you can report on what is happening in your area. If you are able to go to the Cull zones in Somerset, Gloucestershire and possibly Dorset come June the 1st, do so. Walk the footpaths or stake out a badger set to keep a vigil nearby, or sit in your car and guard a driveway. It's astonishing how many lives can be saved by people just sitting in their cars overnight with a thermos glass to hand. Fundraise for night vision and infrared binoculars and such like if you can't get to the Cull zones in person. Pester your MP, your local councillors and your local police service about the costs, the pointlessness and the lack of scientific rigour in these so-called culls. Talk about these issues in your local community, in community groups, WI, youth groups, colleges. Get speakers in, write letters to your local newspaper. In short, don't take the continued threat of more badger culls lying down. Polish your ability to be a pain in the bum and organise. Those that can commit to getting up in the early hours, train to become a badger vaccinator. If you're in Devon, talk to me about it. If you don't live in Devon, approach your local badger group and wildlife trusts, many of which are training up badger vaccinators. The AHVLA vaccination training course is full for this year, but they have said they will consider running more courses this year if there is a demand, so get yourself on the waiting list if you haven't already done so. Those who can't commit the time, to help fundraise instead, or contact farmers about badger vaccination. Finally, I'm delighted to announce that in May, from the 22nd to the 31st, there will be a march called the Great Badger Trail from Gloucester to London. This will be like an Aldermaston march, but for the badgers. We will be walking through Gloucester to Cirencester, Witney, which is David Cameron's constituency, incidentally, and we hope to get some politicians to come along and make some pithy comments about this present government and Owen Paterson in particular. Oxford, Wallingford, Henley, Minehead, Slough, Hounslow and on to Westminster in time for the eve of the Badger Cull starting date. We need as many people as possible to join us, even if just for an hour or a day or a week, or if you can bear it, a whole 10 days, which I'm planning to do. We will be raising money to help to stop the badger culls and to show a visible commitment to conserving our native wildlife and to send a massive message to this government that we won't stand for this. We will run workshops and talks and things along the way. We need communities along route to get involved to show practical support to run these workshops and playgroups and talks on the issues along the way. The website for the Great Badger Trail will be launched tomorrow, and there'll be a video on it from me, which I did yesterday. And there'll be a way of registering online if you want to take part. I'm nearly finished. We don't mind how you join in, incidentally, so whether you want to go on bicycles, rollerblades, mobility scooters, running, walking or dancing the route, please just join us. And make this a really huge event that will excite the media for a full 10 days before the badger culls are officially due to start, and make this government see that we have massive opposition to their insane policy. Thank you very much.